Thank you for the kind invitation, David, Tomer, the Pillar team. It's great to be here, and like you say, one speaker's chicken pox is another speaker's heart attack. So thanks a lot. As you can see, I'm a professor in medicine. How many professors in medicine are in the room? Okay, well that helps. I can say basically whatever I want. I will show, however, some, I would say, original material of what we looked at on crypto health solutions that I hope you'll find not only telling about crypto health, but also about the blockchain space in general. And it ties into David's morning session about business agility and the difference between beliefs and data sciences and what actually is gut feeling versus reality. And I want to thank, of course, to my analysts that without that, none of this would have happened. I know that we're right before lunch, so like they taught me in the military, I'll be brief, I'll be brilliant, and I'll be gone. So don't worry about it. A little bit about my journey. So as I mentioned, I have a military background. The reason I say that is not only that we are mission-driven and data-driven and not risk-aversive. We work on a need-to-know basis, and this unconference is exactly that. You know, just a few minutes before you know stuff, and that's perfectly fine. Uncertainty is not a bug. It is a feature of what we do. We have to embrace it. We have to be happy with it. And also, because truly I believe that none of us is as good as all of us. And the whole concept of decentralization, the whole concept of network effect, the whole concept of the new world that we want to create is built on that idea that our relationships are interdependent. And so healthcare, in this Cambrian explosion of all the solutions that are coming out there, healthcare is the thing that will be disrupted because by definition you will see that it needs that interdependence that is lacking. I, after the military, did a full academic career in pain medicine. I built 4.5 departments in 3 different countries, in Israel, in Switzerland, in the United States, and in Japan. So it's safe to say that I'm familiar with the business of healthcare around the world. They are, to some extent, different, but to a large extent, they are quite the same, and we'll talk about that. I'm sure you've heard about the opioid epidemic that is happening all over the world, but especially in the United States. Every 7 minutes, someone dies. I'll repeat that. Every 7 minutes, someone dies from an opioid overdose. So by the time we're done, there will be about 8 people who died from an opioid overdose in the United States. And it is all because of predatory practices in centralized economies. So this is why I invite you to come to my workshop to learn about what are the 5 things that you need to know on how to create a decentralized economy in healthcare, to understand how do you create an ecosystem that encourages good practices but discourages predatory practices. Not that there won't be, there will always be bad actors, but that transparency and immutability and the interdependence that the distributed ledger technologies bring to the fray, this Hawthorne effect of people looking over you, just makes these predatory practices a little bit more difficult. I am, not surprisingly, a subject matter expert for the Department of Defense and the Veterans Health Administration. These are huge systems. Just to give you an idea, the Veterans Health Administration has 157 hospitals with over a budget of over $160 billion. So this is larger than many countries. I think it is the 8th largest in the world in terms of its collective size in countries. And it requires solutions that pertain to systems thinking and to strategic planning. In the last decade, I've been involved in what I call digiceuticals, so all these new technologies that are coming out there, immersive technologies like virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality, extended reality, choose your reality, all these things that are brought into the fray in order to help with behavior modification, in order to treat chronic lifestyle diseases, but also in healthcare redesign, which will be the topic, again, of one of my talks, if you will choose them, of course. And I used to call myself a crypto health enthusiast. I think that is not accurate enough. I am a venture partner in a large crypto fund, community first crypto fund in New York City. And I am head of the healthcare advisory, so I'm privy to a lot of early technologies that are out there. And just, I think it was 2 weeks ago, one of my clients said to me, Dr. Cahana, really, thank you so much. And I didn't feel that I did anything special, so I kind of said, what was it that I really helped? You know, because I didn't really know what and he said, I don't know, it was like something, I was confused, and we talked, and you made it clear, and now I know how to move forward. And he said, you were like a guide, you're like a shepherd. So I thought that crypto shepherd would be a little bit too biblical, and I like the fact that Sherpas are like 10,000 feet in the, or 3,000 meters in the air, and for each one of you, you go up to the summit, stick your flag, take pictures. For me, I schlep everything and do it 15 times a day. So Crypto Health Sherpa is what I do. My first Medium blog early this year, I think it was in February, it was tough for me to start to blog. You have to understand, at my age, I'm 34 with 20 years of experience. Blog is a 4-letter word for us. I wrote over 120 peer-reviewed articles, so for me to just write stuff on the internet didn't seem serious. However, I was, convinced that that's the way to go. And I basically wrote, why does crypto need a doctor and medicine need blockchain? And basically it was that in our Crypto Monday events, we now have every Monday in 23 cities. People meet at Monday and just interact with each other. When we started, we were like 45 in New York City. Now we're over 7,500 all over the world. And people say, are you really a doctor? So it is not usual to see medical doctors. So I find myself in this special niche that today I'm talking to the crypto space, trying to healthify it, if that's a word. And most of my time, I sit with healthcare and try to blockchainize it, because they have no clue what that is. For them, blockchain equals some Chinese fentanyl and some, Bitcoin hacks, and that's pretty much where the discussion is done. That's why I'm a little bit antsy about unconferences. I was at an unconference at the Trust Project in the US, which is a big healthcare thing. And when I put my thing on blockchain is the trust protocol, nobody came to it. So, we'll see. But I'm in that niche in between. And I wrote something provocative that got 2,000 pings in one evening. So the next day I got, congratulations, you're the top crypto health blogger on Medium. So now my 12-year-old respects me. And, suddenly I'm somebody. So why health? So it's a huge market. I'm not particularly familiar with the health market in Lithuania, so if anybody wants to come and talk to me and educate me about that, I'll be gladly obliged, or anyone from wherever you're from, and tell me about it, even Florida, because it's its own country. But just come to me and talk about it. It's a huge market. It is getting more and more expensive. It takes a big chunk out of GDP, and people, what they don't understand is that at least in the United States, 48 out of the 50 states, the healthcare systems are the largest employer. Largest employer. After the recession, the only occupation actually increased in hiring was healthcare. So when the world falls into recession, everybody gets sick, and there's a whole economy of taking care of sick people. And so when you close a hospital that is in a rural area, it's not just about access that they don't have anymore to take care of their hypertension, diabetes, metabolic syndrome, cancer, and so on. You are also taking away the largest employer, because all the physician assistants, all the nurse practitioners, all the front desk, all the home care is done by the local community. Now, not only is it huge, in the United States, it is the worst business ever. It is the only business you see here on this graph, life expectancy versus cost. You can see that the cost is over $10,000 per person in purchase parity, and life expectancy, actually, this is the third year now where life expectancy is actually getting shorter in the United States. So how about I give you something that costs more, you get less, and you die sooner? That doesn't sound like a good business proposition. And it keeps awake a lot of people, a lot of politicians, a lot of researchers. I find myself a lot on the Hill talking, testifying in the Senate and with the current administration, which is a whole different experience that we can talk about over a single malt. But the point is that the current approach of how everybody thinks that we should fix healthcare, all the smart people that are building the digital medicine, that are building solutions, and all the IT folks that are out there that are working on cloud computing and predictive analytics and population health, are looking at healthcare as if it is a problem of optimization. Okay, there's too much information out there. There's 163 exabytes out there of stuff. It is impossible for human beings to understand that, so I will create an AI program that is anthropomorphized into a robot that will whisper into my ear and tell me stuff so I can say to the patient what they have. That's the approach. AI, machine learning, deep learning, reinforcement learning, deep reinforcement, you name it. It is a big buzz in the US. There's a lot of money, and I'll show a slide later that's poured into it, but it is as if we are trying to optimize a broken system. And I don't have to tell you what it is to garnish an omelet with foul eggs. The innovation itself, digiceuticals, we mentioned a little bit, 3D printing, 4D printing, even if you don't think about things like autonomous vehicles or mobility for non-urgent medical transfer, Uber medicine, these things actually work, but again, the idea is how can we make things more expensive? So instead of pills now that cost $1,700 a pill, how do we make a therapy that costs $1 million? So now we're doing, I'm sure you heard about CAR T, how to use immunotherapy where you weaponize the immune system, you genetically modify it, you inject the person that treatment and actually elongate cancer, terminal cancer. So we have now $1 million worth treatments that nobody can pay for. And the whole idea of access through telehealth, and these are the solutions you see out there, that the barriers of entry are so high, the business is so friction-full that it creates consolidation and oligopolies. And the basic problem in healthcare, and if we do that workshop, this is the workshop where I ask you guys to simulate. Each and one has to pretend who they are. Some of you will be patients, some of you will be insurers, some of you will be politicians, some of you will be healthcare providers. And you will sit in your groups and you will talk as if you were that stakeholder, and you will realize very quickly that this is not a Hollywood story of good guys, bad guys. This is more like a Greek tragedy. Either we all win or we all lose. You start to understand that the interactions, the decisions, the dynamics that are happening between the stakeholders are just because of a certain optic with blind spots to other stakeholders that are creating this current mess. So the problem is that the way I see blockchain disrupting healthcare is not by introducing yet another technology, but by changing, by the virtue of its technological capacities, the business model. And so it is not surprising that each stakeholder has their own database with their own queries, with their own architecture, with their own stuff. Those businesses are multi-billion-dollar businesses who have zero incentives to change whatever they have, zero incentives to try to transform or reach out or to create a common economy. And so I'm telling you this because when you talk to your friends who are developing solutions, again, try to think about not optimizing what is out there, but can we change these relationships. And so it's not surprising that in a data-rich environment like in healthcare, where we have electronic health records, where we have all the inputs, the quantified self, with our Fitbits and with our different type of sensors. We have now continuous glucose monitoring through the skin. We have pills that go in our gut and can look from the inside on what's going on. There is a plethora of sensors that are out there that can capture what we do in terms of activity, and so to describe quantifiably who we are. And so we can think, okay, so blockchain really brings to the table security, interoperability, the whole host of solutions for identity problems, and the most important is perhaps change the economics or the relationship. And whoever wants to see, this is a true slide. This is not an invented slide. This is the organization chart of the health and human services of the US government, okay? So I don't know if someone really thought about this. How can I build something like this? But you can tell that this is a multi-stakeholder, opaque, friction-full, data-rich environment where the incentives are malaligned. And so hopefully the hype, the hope, the idea is that blockchain, through its virtues, to perhaps establish a peer-to-peer relationship that will make a lot of people happy, but more people unhappy because it will disintermediate, usually people of power with predatory practices. Perhaps by enabling smart contracts, we will be able to exclude human fallibility and say, okay, I don't have to count on the goodness of your heart for an execution of a decision. More importantly, you can establish a reputation system, and I mentioned that. You're more than welcome to look at my Medium post on multi-generational electronic health records. That if we think of health data as money, which is yours, it's personal, it's valuable, you wanted to keep it secure in a digital wallet that rhymes with Miller, and that goes into your pocket. Okay, you want it accessible every day, every time, anywhere, any place. If it is a true asset, you also expect it to accrue in value, so you want to inherit it or you want to donate it. We have to change the way we think of health data. And so it is important to have that reputation of that immutable system that goes after you. And of course, the whole idea of a dynamic, truthful market that represents value and not price manipulation. So in theory, there are a lot of real-world use cases. In tiny here, I think somewhere there's healthcare. I don't know why they put, out of all things, one of the older solutions that are out there. But in theory, you're supposed to know about healthcare. In theory, this is not supposed to be the first time that you're seeing a doctor talk about crypto health, but in practice, this is not what is happening. And so we kind of asked ourselves, why is it? We had different kind of ideas, but we said, instead of making hunches on this, let's look at what the crypto health in terms of numbers actually represents. And so you can see here that out of all the ICOs, there are, I think, about 1,200 since they started. It's difficult. The quality of these data are very difficult to extricate. They're anywhere between 1,500 to 1,700 white papers. So you can see that healthcare represents around 8.5% to 10% of that space. Whereas actually, in terms of the raise itself, out of the $12 billion that were infused into the ICO market in 2018, only $150 million, which is about a 1.5%, went into crypto health solutions. And if you want to look to where it basically went into finance, into trading, and into communications, which is not surprising. Okay, so I'm not saying this as a disappointment. I'm saying this as a fact that despite the enormity or the size of the healthcare market and the interest that it brings to society, currently crypto investors are not extremely interested in the health system. If you look at the sizes again of some ICOs that came out this year, this is from Smith and Crown. There are other sources. That's why I wrote between 5 and 10. Some of them, one of the difficulties is that you have to actually talk to each CEO because some of them stopped after the pre-sale or the private sale and said, I had enough, so it's almost like it looks like it's a closed or a zombie project, but actually it's continuing. And they put a hold on it. But you can see, again, that the largest size was at 25 or shy of 25 million. And more importantly, what's important, the point I'm trying to make here, is that it is a fraction to what actually regular VC funding gives. So the VC market this year will be $7 billion compared to the 150 or maybe 200 this year million dollars in the crypto space. Okay, so the sizes of deals are more numerous. The average size actually is a bit bigger, and so again, maybe it's because healthcare, crypto health solutions. The first one started, I think, on Q2 2017, so maybe it's kind of a little bit early compared to other sectors where you saw solutions already coming out in 2015 and 2016. From my discussions with crypto investors, whenever you say health, everybody says, whoa, 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 HIPAA, the patient health information, that scares me, and so they don't want to go. So there's kind of a regulatory aspect. There's really nothing to it when you actually start to study it, but it is a barrier. What is difficult is the token design and the incentive planning, and I have a talk about how to develop a tokenomics in healthcare, which is based a lot with what David talked about, behavioral economics, so the same thing, the neurobehavior of behavior modification in disease. That is an interesting aspect. Don't think that just you be paying for someone for their gym will actually say, okay, now I'll start to eat healthy food. Doesn't work that way. And there are some legal uncertainties around ICOs. I'm sure you're all familiar with the utility security debacle that's going on. And so every day I get pings and calls, and Alex, is it verboten or not, or what to do? And so whatever reason it is, the crypto investors have not, and I would say wrongfully so, have not yet warmed up to crypto health investments. Like I said, day zero for us in healthcare was at the end of October 2016. The US government had a ideation challenge or a hackathon where basically they said, bring us all the brightest to come over and tell us, what do you think blockchain will do in healthcare? And there were 15 finalists, 3 winners, and you can see here from this slide that the identities usually came from thinking tanks, either private or individual. So this is not mainstream research that said, I'm interested in knowing this. These are individuals, just like you, who read about stuff, who started to putz around with coins, that said, wow, this is really interesting, let's do this, and then afterwards said, you know what, maybe this will be helpful. So these are, I would say, individual initiatives. And when we looked at the initiatives, the vast majority of them, surprisingly, were pragmatic. They were not just conceptual, we think conceptually that it would be good for the betterment of the planet. They were actually ideas. We can create a self-sovereign electronic record. We can create a credentialing system for providers. We can create a master patient index. So most of them were pragmatic. However, when we started to look at how much of them actually translated into the ICO environment, the majority of them actually stayed as a proposal. So they're not moved into real businesses. And so again, just to show you the complexity of taking a good idea and turning it into a company. If we look at the thematics, the vast majority is in health information exchanges, electronic health records. I'm sure you're familiar that with Obama, we had what's called the High-Tech Act of 2009, which basically said every medical information has to be digitized. No more on pieces of paper, no more napkins, no more writing, on your hand things. Everything has to be digitized. We can speak separately if you're interested what people think about it, if doctors think that it's good or not. I'll say in parentheses, no, and that's the #1 reason of physician burnout. If you don't know, every day a physician in the United States kills themselves because of being a doctor in the United States. So a lot of these ideas was how can we improve electronic health records and information exchange. Some of them spoke to revenue cycle management because there's a lot of waste and friction, so payers want to look at it. Analytics, of course, and then you have the supply chain, the directories, and credentialing that comes after it. Now, we decided to look a little bit more in depth, and this is, like I said, a preliminary work that I'm showing for the first time, so please indulge and be patient. Wanted to look at absolute numbers, at categories, if the projects are alive or dead or zombie projects. We wanted to look at the team composition, if there is or not a domain expertise, and we assumed that LinkedIn is kind of a semi-KYC, although it is not, of course, in the pure sense, because we can write whatever we want in LinkedIn, although there is a bit of governance around that. And we also looked at roadmap, business models, and tokenomics. I will not have you hold your breath. That third one is awful, okay? It's really not well thought through, and we're still looking at it. What is interesting out of these, again, we had about 149, 150. We're still arguing if that's a real paper, what we're seeing or not. But we were able to analyze 128 papers, which is quite a read, I have to admit. And we kind of crossed over each other to make sure that we're all kind of, so multiple eyes looked at white papers. And you can see here, according to years and also according to size, that health information exchange is something that was most looked at, and then followed by analytics and revenue cycle management. I think that what's more interesting is the temporal dynamics. You can see an explosion in 2017 in looking at stuff in general, and then a peak drop in 2018, basically a whole drop that we don't want to do that anymore. Does anybody have an idea what happened in early 2018 that caused people just to stop looking at self-sovereign electronic health records? Any ideas? Sorry? No. It's a good thought, but not at all. I mentioned that before. It's the whole security utility tokens. All these self-sovereign electronic health records were designed on utility tokens, that basically the assumption was that participation in the platform would redeem you with utility tokens for good, healthy behavior, would redeem providers on doing whatever they want, would redeem insurers on population health. So there was a whole host of people saying, okay, this is great. This is the way we can change the behavior of the ecosystem through utility tokens. And then the SEC came out and said, that doesn't exist. Nobody knew what to do. Obviously, there are solutions around it. I'll mention it briefly at the end of this talk. But now with security tokens, there is an ability to create a dual economy behind that. I'm glad to say that I participated in the first design of a health security token in the world. And so you can see that there's a temporality and that actually people now are looking at different things to do and to look at. If we look at the status, most ICOs are alive. Some of them are, of course, on life support. So, in that are robust ones and others that are like, I don't know, every day I think I'm going to just shut down because my burn is too big. But most of them are still alive, and 20% are basically dead but pretending to be alive. And what's interesting here is that we looked at the viability of the projects with those who had and did not have a business model inside the white paper. And not surprisingly, but it's nice to see it quantitatively, those who actually write a real business model, and this is again without going to the degrees of how do you actually give a grade to that business model, because not all are created equally, still having a business model in it protects you from being zombified or dead, which is a nice way of saying that when you don't write it well, then you die. The same thing here is when you look at the team core, core team subsection, again, when teams are written, when they're real faces, when they're real names, when there's a LinkedIn that you can follow up and look at it, it's not Joe, John, Jack, Jim, this. We actually look at the domain expertise. So if they're talking about building some credentialing solution for healthcare and you have no one that works on identity or cybersecurity, it's kind of a little bit funky. If you have something very elaborate on a redemptive ecosystem and there's not even one doctor in the team. So again, we've shown that when you don't have a good team, and that's maybe the takeaway from this talk, then probably that is the strongest indicator that the ICO will go dead. Again, we might know these things, I just think that it's very nice to see numbers behind it. We tried to look in terms of the length of when it's open and all that. We didn't find anything meaningful. We're still looking at it. Again, it's very difficult to pull out the quality. There are discrepancies between the white paper and the website. We tried to pull out more things from the website that are usually up to date. But in general, the quality of the things that are out there are mediocre. And not surprisingly, the majority of things that are happening of crypto health, I would say, initiatives are in the United States. It's really not much going in Europe. I was surprised to see that, so maybe it's because Europe is happy with their healthcare system, or maybe they don't think about crypto, or they don't care about crypto. What is interesting that, not surprisingly, all of the health information exchange projects are in the US, which leads me to think that this whole idea of capturing, digital information and how do you create and exchange a platform or a marketplace is something that is preoccupying the United States. Things that come out of Europe, out of China, out of Africa and Australia usually pertain to supply chain, usually pertain to credentialing, usually pertain to some type of peer-to-peer micropayments for those who are more vulnerable, to bank the unbanked, to help. There's some very interesting projects that speak to, tie to other identity projects to help refugees and to help those who don't have access to regular health care. When we meet next time next year, hopefully, I'll be invited again, I don't know. We will be looking at is distributed ledger technology necessary? We just have to figure out the ontology of how to determine, what are things that need to happen in the ecosystem that would trigger and say, yes, absolutely. And again, I have a talk saying 11 reasons why DLT is imperative for healthcare. So if you please want to learn what those 11 reasons are, please come. That's 25 minutes, so it's about 2 minutes for each reason. Is the white paper full of jargon? We found a lot of them are kind of technical and others are kind of jargony in medical. And so if it's not balanced, if it doesn't explain clearly, we're trying to look at some semantic software to see how we can figure that one out in terms of the what grade does that, is it an 8th grade level, is it a university level, and so on. Is there a business plan? We spoke about tokenomics. We weren't able to find, and of course the usual things of their website, Telegram, and GitHub. Very interesting, and this is a project that we just started. We're looking at the ICO rating sites. There are over a dozen of sites. And we're trying to figure out how these self-proclaimed sites became sites that are, giving opinions on other sites and so on. So it'll be interesting to look at that. I would say to you guys, just use common sense. You can read here from one of the papers. It's really interesting. Innovative Bioresearch, that sounds good. Innovative Bioresearch is a biotech company that is very interesting, by the way. I actually have real biotech companies that are coming to me to ask how can they enter the crypto space, because I would say traditional funding has been so prohibitive for them, especially if you're middle-sized. They're so prohibitive that they're actually looking at crypto as an alternative to raise money. So we are launching an ICO for developing a novel AIDS cure research. I'm not sure what AIDS cure research is, because the research of AIDS cure is the AIDS cure itself, but maybe just a language thing, as well as an application providing, on one hand, decentralized database. Those are nice words, yeah, right? We like that, for clinical data. And on the other hand, a social platform for the HIV seropositive community. That's beautiful. We always talk about community and all this. And here I'm getting all excited to access future services. So it's community and access and decentralization. And it's just so wonderful. And then, of course, I see from the smiles that you already read this. And in addition, you will be able, with the tokens, to buy any classic, iconic JDM car from the JDM Island Garage, backed by values of actual physical goods. So just use common sense also. Whoever does, you missed the deadline. So no, you still have time. So till August 1st. So please rush and do INNBC coins. So as I started to mention, and this is something that has been happening the last 2-3 weeks, but I definitely sense a movement from enterprise money starting to come in. Big players are starting to understand now that there's more clarification on the security tokens and security token offerings. There's some clarity, at least in the US. People are starting to understand the advantages of digitizing securities, on offering fractional ownership, and maybe trying to parcel between different parts of the security, between the voting and the dividends and the stock itself and so forth. So we're starting to see, and this is from PwC, that pure ICO funding had its advantages when it was using, utility tokens. That model is probably in the US gone. And the ones that are out there that are working on this model are, of course, seeking non-US investors. The traditional VC funding, as I mentioned, is becoming more and more prohibitive, especially for middle-sized companies that have very good IP, that just need a little bit of help, and the price that they have to pay for that help is just unrelative. And I spoke to a couple of CEOs that said, it's just unreasonable to give up so much of the company for so little of the money, and there's a lot of politics also behind it. So we're starting to see some I would say, hybrid of traditional seed or pre-Series A or even a Series A funding, and afterwards going to a STO. And I think that that's really the most important thing, and we're getting to the end of my talk, and I wrote it in this recent blog speaking about the first health security token, is that what security tokens, besides being compliant, which is fine, really insidiously add an unrecognized incentive. And think about it. It's not only that people will engage with the platform and engage with healthy behavior because that is the right thing to do, but that every time they do that, that increases the value of the platform that they will partially own through their security token. And that really increases the skin of the game. That probably is what is missing in all these wellness programs and value-based care and all these brownie points that if you do this, and you can go to the swimming pool and get a massage, and it just doesn't happen. People buy their Fitbits, and after 3 weeks, it goes into the drawer. So it's about actually transforming people from passive healthcare consumers to active health and I would say wealth producers. And I'll repeat that because that is the whole point. And when it was asked in Congress, and they said, Senator Schumer asked me, what is the problem of healthcare? I said, the problem is that we treat patients as hopeless and helpless, passive health service consumers. And so what do you do in a capitalist society when you're a consumer? You consume more. And if it is detached, as you will learn from my workshop, from actually the payer, when it doesn't come out of your pocket, then there's no incentive for any type of accountability. Things are changing now because the current administration were able to reverse a lot of the Obamacare pieces, which makes the whole system unviable. So we're going into a place where the burden of payment now falls on patients. And so suddenly you have to pay simply money that you do not have. And so peer-to-peer transparent pricing is starting to pop up. And so you have healthcare consumers that are passive and don't care are now transforming into consumers that do care, because it's now out of their pocket, into active health producers. They're doing healthy behaviors because they're getting rewarded for them, and doctors are getting rewarded, and insurers are rewarding healthcare providers, but also they own part of the platform that they're using. And that is wonderful, and anybody here can think about what would that mean on secondary markets. So I'm exactly 60 seconds before the end of my time. Again, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm at alex@cryptooracle.io. Okay, we believe that crypto is the biggest thing that happened in the history of humanity. We had a big argument if it was actually the Gutenberg printing machine, but no. And of course, Radix, you know, we'll solve all these scalability and speed. Really reach out to me, ask, and if you are not personally interested in healthcare and you know someone who does, and I know each and every one of you have a doctor, so don't pretend that you don't know someone, please have them reach out to me, and thank you very much for this opportunity.